Hello, everyone. Is the Prophet Michael David, aka Aries, and it's been a bit. And today is my baby boomer episode or video. Okay, ground rules and format. I am going to use plenty of profanity, but as much as I can, I'm going to take the venom out of it. Profanity, it's just words, they are useful. And as far as format goes, for the first part, I'm just going to look at the green dot like I'm talking to the baby boomers themselves. And then after I thoroughly insult them, I'm going to explain to the younger generations, X like me, um, and the millennials, the Zetas, that's you, Gen Z, that's your new name, is Zetas. And I guess the Alphas are maybe a little bit too young right now. But I will explain how the baby boomers totally fucked the world in less than half a century and how we got here. And in future videos, I'll tell you how we can get out. Okay, here we go. And speaking directly to the baby boomers, on average, you are the most incompetent, stupid, selfish, dumb fucks that have ever walked this planet. You are a cancer upon the planet Earth. You have almost completely destroyed an entire planet in so many different ways in less than half a century. You're trash. Okay, so now to any baby boomers watching, I'm going to elaborate on all the triggers you're feeling and why they don't really matter. And the first one is you're going to be like super offended. Didn't your mom raise you right? Blah, 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 blah. I mean, who are you going to complain to? My mother? She's dead. She's right over there. And who else would you complain to that I would give a shit? No one. Why would I care? If you're still offended, that is the video on YouTube that you need to watch. That's Hit 'em Up by the Prophet Tupac Amaru Shakur. And for once in your fucking geriatric lives, you need to shut the fuck up and really listen to a wise man, a true prophet of God, all right? And then do a calculation either in your head or on paper about how many fucks Tupac gives if he insults Biggie or Puffy or Bad Boy or anybody else that he talks about in that song. So really do a calculation about how many fucks he gives if he offends any of those people, and that is exactly the same amount of fucks I give if I offend any of you baby boomers. I'm not going to do the calculation for you, but I'll give you a hint. It's round and it has a hole in it. So now you're going to counter that the boy is being ageist, right? He's saying that baby boomers are incompetent and way past their prime and should be retired, which is true, but I'm not being ageist. You're the worst generation in the history of humanity. You never had a prime. You know, I'm not accusing you of being a bunch of has-beens. I'm accusing you of being a bunch of never has-beens, a bunch of never will-be's. You are the worst generation in human history. Um, you're a bunch of never will be's. So now you're saying, okay, if I'm accusing you of being a bunch of never has beens and never will be's, that I'm saying you're worthless. But I'm not saying that at all because that would be disrespectful to things that have zero worth. As a, I'm fond of some, I mean, I love my parents and everything, and I like a lot of your muses, but on average, for the baby boomers for your generation, like, you're not worthless. You have a negative worth. The world would be better had you not existed at all. So now you're extremely offended and you're saying, what do you mean the world would be better if we had not existed at all? And it's as paradoxical as this sounds, but it's true. In other words, on average, for all baby boomers, generationally speaking, the night you were conceived, your mom should have just sucked that dick. or take it in the ass or just said she had a headache, anything except what actually happened, because that turned out to be super bad for humanity. And in conclusion, before I get on to talking to the youngins and everything, um, the baby boomers are a cancer upon the earth. And the sooner you all get retired and sit in that chair, put on your sweatpants and your Velcro shoes and your t shirt that says age is just a number or whatever stupid fucking saying it says on it, all the better. But when that happens, you can talk amongst yourselves. But your only job at that point until the day you die is to shut the fuck up. And definitely do not interact with the younger generations. You have nothing to teach them. And in conclusion, I guess you would say, your generation is known in the development of planetary societies as the Great Filter, this thing that humanity has to get through if it is going to become a spacefaring civilization. And how it works is when industrialization, then electricity and computers and everything come together in a certain generation, which it did with the baby boomers, and they have all these benefits, they have this opportunity to spread peace and share amongst each other and make the world greater. You got the world served to you on a silver platter. You could have been the greatest generation ever. But as you can see in 2024, and you guys have been in control for the last 40 years, you have created the world in your image. It's a hellscape. And so, if humanity cannot retire you, then my prophecies come true. Half the world population dies, and it just gets worse after that and everything. But you guys got to realize that you're just the worst. The whole marriages ending, 50% of marriages ending in divorce started with you. All the litigation, private prisons, all the evil stuff in the world that's popped up in the past 40 years is just you greedy fucks trying to make more money. And you are the absolutely worst generation in human history. And you will be known as such as long or short as human history lasts. Okay, and now, as promised, I'm going to pivot to the younger generations. X, like me, the millennials, Zetas, again, that's you, Gen Z, and maybe the alphas are too young for this, but here we go. Okay, so this all begins in 1946 because baby boomers, by definition, are people born between 1946 and 1964. And that's because at the end of World War II, all the men came back from war and, they made up for lost time. But it's even deeper than that because World War I was started in 1904 or 5, and World War II didn't end until 1945. So it was that 40-year span that was just like pure war, except for the short duration between the two. And in that span, you had 100 million Westerners that died, most of them Soviets and everything, if you can think of it that way. But also China had a revolution, and 100 million people or so died there. Maybe it's not high, but over 100 million people died in a very short span, and it caused many economic things to happen. So basically what happens after most wars, where a lot of people die, is that it causes hyperinflation because not everybody dies broke and everything. And so after a bunch of people die in a short amount of period, those goods transfer to their descendants, their beneficiaries and everything. And so it usually you have, especially after war, you have less people with more money that don't want to do the austerity thing they did during war. Plus, you got to rebuild the countries that were destroyed by the war, and all that causes a shortage of uh, supplies. And because of supply and demand, the cost of the supplies and services go up, and it usually causes hyperinflation. Well, it's kind of like the Americans knew that, and the Europeans were scared after World War II that America was going to say, "Well, we'll fix your continent or help you fix it for a price and everything." But then we get to have a little mini America here, kind of like what America tried to do to the Middle East before they nationalized. But to the surprise of the Europeans, America didn't do that. They said, tell you what, you'll fix your own place, we'll help you monetarily or even with supplies and everything. But what we ask for is that, we control the seas. We have the largest navy. We'll make sure that all the countries can trade together and everything will be cool. And they did do that and it did help. And that's why globalization outran the basically inflationary effects at the time. But what America was thinking about wasn't that in the long run, if you control the seas, it's a military thing, but you also control the arms deals. In the long run, America will go down in history for one thing as the largest arms dealer in the world. And the entire Navy is basically part of that process. It was not to protect people or project power or whatever, it's to protect their arms shipments to other countries. So the East knew this as well, the Soviet Union at the time, and China and other countries. And China played a real passive role. They knew you could not compete against America at the time, it was part of their doctrine. But the Soviets were a little bit different and did, hence the nuclear proliferation. And then the 1980s came around. The baby boomers came into the workforce. Again, they came into power earlier than any other generation because, hundreds of millions of people have died. And they started making money real quick. And they also started causing inflation. Like there's this thing back in the 80s where there was this Fed director or whatever named Paul Volcker and everything, who one day, unlike these days, he just raised the interest rates 2 full points. Normally they do in like quarters and everything, but he did that because the baby boomers were such like a power and like they knew they were such a powerful generation. And of course, they're narcissistic assholes, but they would go into their bosses' offices and be like, I want to get married, I want to buy a house and everything, so I need to get paid more money. They would basically lobby or threaten their bosses, to give them a raise or they would leave. And they were also the first generation to like jump jobs. In the past, before that, people would stay at jobs for like a generation, their entire lives. But the baby boomers knew that, with computers and digitalization, and that they could move freely from place to place, that they could use that as leverage. And so that is what caused the inflation. And it got like really high in the 80s. And so what Paul Volcker basically did was he raised the interest rate 2 points to cause a recession so that companies would actually have layoffs and the baby boomers would stop doing that. So then you got the mid 80s and the 90s, and the baby boomers worked their way up the corporate chain, and it's easier for them because, again, they're going against generations that have been depleted by war until they're the bosses. Some of them, maybe suffered through the corporate recession of like the early 90s. My dad did. It affected our family. Story for another day and everything. But also with women in the workforce, the dawn of modern women. And then you had the whole thing. They were the ones that invented the 50% divorce rate. I'm not sure if it's always 40% women, 10% men, but that's when it started. A whole equality with men and women, both in the workforce. And I have total different stories about that. I mean, my mom was a working mom. She was. My brother and I spent a bunch of time in daycare. It's a whole elongated story and everything. But in a nutshell, I guess, and I'm going to say this in my next video as well, especially to the women, you can't have it all. Nobody can. As time grew on. They stayed in power, even though they're getting older. They're the worst generation in history, so they're the worst mentors ever as well. And to all the baby boomers, I know this isn't the section for this, but go ahead, look me in my eyes. Like I never learned anything from any of you. I mean, I'll be honest. And so, from the 90s to the aughts to the current time, they still retain their power and their positions, and the world still falls into the gutter because they're a trash generation. We're led by a trash generation. And the world will continue to fall until they are retired, either, you know, by themselves or somebody retires them. So for all the younger generations, just remember that for all your dating stuff, which I'm going to get in, this is like a macro overview of like the economics of the last century that has screwed you all over. It's not your fault. Like, I hate to sound like a therapist, but like in Good Will Hunting, but it's not your fault. A lot of your personal decisions, or all of them, are your fault. But like the macro, why you guys are broke AF, the height of disposable income was the baby boomers. And since they're such incompetent fucks, it's just gone like this for men and women for a generation, or almost 2 generations now. So again, it's not your fault. And, you know, they either retire and the world heals, or they don't and the world continues to spiral into the gutter. I hate to say it that way, but that's how it is. It's not your fault. Your decisions are your fault, but the whole macro, why the world is screwed, is just because it's being led by the dumbest fucking idiots that's ever walked the earth. All right, longer video than usual, and I know it's been a span since my last, but obviously I've been doing a lot of stuff. So I love you all, even you baby boomers. You know, it's never too late to change. But as always, rule number 1, do not touch other people without their consent, aka do not hurt each other. And rule number 2, try not to lie. Or it's all about honesty. Lies are a tick down. Try not to lie. All right, I love you all. I'll talk to you later.